First of all, I want to thank Rabbi Tatz for joining us again. It's always a pleasure. The last session we had last week with Rabbi Tatz was phenomenal. Anyone, as I mentioned earlier, anybody who missed it is welcome to go back to our homepage. And if you click on the poster of Rabbi Tatz, it takes you to a page where you can actually watch last week's presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and everybody else who's spoken to me have told me how much they enjoyed it as well. So we're very, very fortunate to have Rabbi Tatz with us. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free just to send in the comment on the chat. And I know Rabbi Tatz is going to be joining us, helping us get ready for Purim. Tonight's session is called Purim and the Sin of Adam. So without further ado, I'm going to have Rabbi Tatz join us. Or maybe with further ado, do I see Rabbi Tatz?
There seems to be an unstable connection, but at the moment I'm with you.
Okay. Okay, great. So here we go. Rabbi Tatz, thank you so much. It's all yours.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to study together. Thanks to Rabbi Karlfunkel, Rabbi Bookbinder, and all you Canadian black belts. And nice to see a few old friends. I see Jonas, who looks like he's been street fighting again, kickboxing or something like that. And I'm sorry I can't be in Toronto as we've been doing in previous years, but let's try to make the most of. I think I see Dr. Moshe, if I'm not mistaken. Pleasure to have you. Pleasure to have you with us. So,
hi, Rabbi.
Hi, who's that?
Oh, Carolyn, I'm back in Toronto. I last saw you in Tel Aviv.
Okay, good. Let me ask you, if you don't mind, could you please mute yourselves? It just saves me from getting the feedback. Let me make a few remarks and try to paint a picture of a subject that is deep. See if we can extend ourselves a little bit and think about something deeper. And then if there's time, you're welcome to ask questions, or you can put them in the chat and the rabbi will perhaps, we can deal with them if there's time. But I suggest, let me try to paint you in some broad brushstrokes, a challenging idea, put our heads into something a little bit more fundamental or profound, if that's okay, and prepare for Purim in that way. We seem to have a slightly unstable connection here, so we'll just do our best to maintain our connection. If it fails, we'll just try to reconnect, and we'll do our best. Can people hear me? Am I not speaking to myself? Some sort of indication you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, so when it comes to Purim, what is the essence here? What is the essence? I'm not talking about the superficiality and the hilarity and the carnival atmosphere. What underlies Purim in the profundity of the Jewish soul and Jewish history? There's an incredible idea which is expressed by Rav Tzadok HaKohen. Rav Tzadok HaKohen was the archetypal non-Chassid who moved into the Chassidic world. You're going back 100 years or more, and was a radical thinker, inspired by his own teacher, the Ishbitzer, who was an absolutely dizzyingly radical Hasidic thinker. And he teaches things which are literally out of this world. I'd like to share with you an insight into one theme that he develops, which is the kind of theme that if you understand it, you begin to realize that there's nothing in the world that moves outside of the sphere of this idea. So I can assure you it's worth tremendous focus and attention, because this is a key to understanding everything, not least of which is the COVID unknowns that we're going through now, but the unknowns of history in general, and the problem of doubt and living behind a mask, if you like, behind a veil, where we long to see spiritual clarity and we don't see it. So let me try to explain what I mean. You know that the battle of Purim, the idea of Purim is a showdown between two nations. Purim is the time of showdown between the Jewish people and Amalek, that genocidal nation who are fanatically anti-Semitic, who live only to destroy us, beginning with their journey through the desert when we were receiving the Torah, when they marched hundreds of miles to attack the Jewish people with no purpose other than to destroy us. And incidentally, it pays to understand that, you know, they were located hundreds of miles from where we were. We're no threat to them and nothing to do with them at all. And they marched a great distance to risk their lives to kill the Jewish people. You have to understand that most nations' anti-Semitism has a reason. They want the Jews out of the picture for some or other reason. This is the nation that wants us dead because that's what they live for. The only sense that it makes to risk your life to kill somebody else is because your life is meaningless if he's around. Right? No purpose in killing somebody when it's going to cost you your life. There's only one reason for that, and that is you live to kill him. And if he's alive, you're not alive. And that's Amalek. Think Nazi Germany on big-time steroids. Think about a culture that lives only to wipe out Jews, man, woman, and child. That's what Amalek was. Haman, the scion of Amalek, was passed a law and managed to get ratified an instruction for all non-Jews on earth, that means entire known culture at the time, to kill all Jews on one day. By the way, why on one day? What's so important? Kill them on one day. The Germans were happy to do it over a number of months or a couple of years if necessary. What's significant about killing all Jews on one day? The idea is a radical uprooting of what we are as a special form of human being. That's called Tselem Elokim. We represent a particular ideal in the world. That's called Tselem, a divine image in a particular way. That needs to be eradicated as one en bloc effort. Incidentally, you know that Esther made a very peculiar request of the king. When Mordechai, when Haman was killed and all his sons were killed, and there was no further danger, she risked her life for one last request from the king. What was that? That Haman and his son should be hanged in order on a tree. That means on a gallows, in a sequence, in order, Haman and his 10 sons. I mean, Esther, what are you worried about? He's dead already. The battle's over. You've won. No, this is significant. And the reason is, of course, this was a spiritual battle. And hanging a human being on a tree is a desecration of the Tselem Elokim. The Torah prohibits that. The Torah prohibits a dead body being hanged, because that's a desecration of the image of God, that human being. And therefore, that's what she wanted. That image should be desecrated. It's a spiritual battle between these two cosmic forces in the world, the Jewish people and Amalek. That's the fundamental idea. What do we represent in the world? Here comes the key. This is what you have to hold in your mind for the whole discussion. The Jewish people represent the imminence of God in the world. Atem Eidai, you are my witnesses. We testify to the fact that God is in the world, even though you don't see him. It's a veiled and masked world. We testify to the fact that behind the mask is a divine presence. The word witness in Hebrew, which is aid, is exactly the same letters as da, which means to know. The function of a witness is to bring clarity of knowledge before the court. And Amalek's job is to assert non-imminence. God is not here. Maybe he is, maybe he is not. Here's the key. The concept of Amalek is the concept of doubt. Doubt. The Jewish people, we assert with certainty that God is here. On Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we say, Havada Shmoi. Your name is certainty. That's our work. Amalek's work in the world is to say, maybe not. Maybe it's evolution. Maybe it's a big bang. Maybe it's happenstance. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe there was a God. Maybe no longer. Maybe he's not interested. All possibilities are open. Amalek in Gematria, that means in numerology, the word Amalek adds up to the same numerical equivalent in Hebrew as the word Sophic, which means doubt. By the way, Rav Dessler points out something fascinating. You probably know that there are some classic notions in the world that are not found in Torah. That means everything in the world is rooted in a word in Torah. Hebrew is the only language in the world in which the word for a word is the same as the word for a thing. The word davar in Hebrew is a word, and the word davar is an object. Why? Everything in the world is a projected, crystallized, condensed expression of a word. The Torah is the genetic material in its words, davar, and every davar object in the world is produced by the genetic material that is the word in Torah. And when something exists in the world and there's no word in Torah, that thing's illusory. That thing has been plastered across the face of reality, but not being projected from a source. And the word doubt never appears in Torah. The Hebrew word Sophic, and of course its corollary vadai, which means certainty, that spectrum of doubt and certainty never appears in Torah. Of course, it doesn't take much to understand that certainty can only exist for the avoidance of doubt. Certainty only exists as the opposite polarity of a doubt. If there's no doubt possible, there's no certainty possible. Things simply are. So doubt and certainty are words of a rabbinic origin. They do not appear in Torah. Which means that we get confused about reality. So we name it, that's legitimate, but not being projected from a divine origin. And so the cosmic battle is between the Jewish people on a political level. We want to kill them because if we don't, they'll kill us. It's a total genocidal battle to the death. But on a cosmic level, we are representing, our effort is to annihilate the gap of doubt in the world, and their battle is to kill us so that that gap remains open. That's where the battle is pitched at a cosmic level. Now, with that background, let me tell you what he says. Stay with me here, because this is of an elegance and a beauty that I think is indescribable. The Talmud asks the following question. Where do we find, here's the question in the Gemara. Where do we find the names of Esther and Mordechai and Haman in the Torah? That's what the Talmud wants to know. Where is Esther's name located in Torah? Where's Haman's name? I'm presuming everybody knows the story of the Megillah of Purim, right? I presume you all know about the Persian Empire that wanted to kill the Jewish people, and Esther, who saved us. I presume we all know that. So the Talmud asks, where do we, by the way, if you want a book to read, there's one book you should read about Purim. It's the Moznaim Press edition of Ma'am Lo'ez. Ma'am Lo'ez, I'm mentioning this because the Ma'am Lo'ez was an amazing classic work, began in the 1600s in Smyrna, in the Turkish Jewish community by Rabbi Yaakov Kuli, later finished by Rabbi Pontromoli, was Italian, of Italian descent in the 1800s. About 100 years ago, began translated. The translation from the original Ladino to Hebrew was begun. The Hebrew edition is wonderful, but it contains many things that were not in the original. And if you want to read the English edition, translated many years ago by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, which is an unbelievable book. What he does is, in this Ladino classic, and by the way, the translation in English from the original Ladino, not via the Hebrew. And what he does there, he takes the story of Purim, and he uses 100 commentaries, 100 classic commentaries, and weaves them into the story, which without telling you where they come from. So you're reading a story of the Megillah with all the interpolated intrigue and drama of the psychological and romantic and political. It's if you're into novels that are exciting, that you can't put down, okay, that's Ma'am Lo'ez. And this one happens to be true. So Ma'am Lo'ez, a great classic and absolutely fascinating, gives you all the lowdown, all the behind the scenes, unspoken, veiled things that are going on in the Megillah. So here's what the Gemara says. Where do we find the names of Mordechai and Haman and Esther in the Torah? Now, what kind of question is that? Of course, we know where we find them. We find them in the Megillah. The Megillah is part of the Bible. It's part of Scripture, one of the 24 books of the Bible. But the meaning of the question is this. Where do those names appear in the original Torah, in the 5 books of Chumash, the root of Torah, which later expands to 24 books? Where do we find those names? All is coded in the original 5 books of Torah, every name, even your name, but certainly all the significant points in Jewish history are coded. Where is the root of those names in Torah? So when it comes to Esther, for example, it says, where's Esther's name located in Torah? Bayomahu astir panai. God says, on that day I shall hide my face. When the Torah predicts exile, when the Jewish people defect from their Jewish obligations, and God warns us there will be an exile in which his face shall be hidden, there the expression I will hide my face, the word hiding is the name Esther. Hastir, Esther, means to hide, and her name means the hidden one. So she's hinted at in the Torah in an exile in which God's face is hidden. How much more dramatically can you say it than Esther said it when she's approaching the king and she suddenly feels completely alone? This woman whose life is an attachment to God cries out, Keli, Keli, lama azavtani. My God, why have you deserted me? Talk about an anguish of loneliness where God can no longer be seen. But you know that was appropriated by another religion later, I presume you know that. But be that as it may, that's where the name Esther is found. But now listen to this. Where do we find the name Haman in the Torah? Where do we find the name Haman? And the answer is amazing. The answer is perfect way in the world.
You're frozen, Rabbi.
Tree.
Rabbi Tatz, if you can hear us, we can't hear you. You seem to be frozen. Okay, everybody, let's just hold together for a few moments, and hopefully Rabbi Tatz will be joining us again in a second.
You think he's aware?
Okay, this is not the first time this loss of connection has happened to me tonight in London. So there may be something unstable here about the connection, as I said. So just be patient, and if it goes down, hopefully it'll come back again. I said this, when God asks man and woman, the question, did you eat from the fruit of the tree? Haman comes into being. What is the connection? What is going on? Man and woman eat the fruit of the forbidden tree, and God asks man, did you eat the fruit? And Haman comes into being. What's the connection? The first thing you notice is that if Haman's name is located in the beginning of history, it must be very fundamental. This end of Jewish history, Haman is more or less the last book ever written, the Megillah of Esther, 2,350 years ago, on the cusp of prophecy disappearing. After that was Hanukkah. There's nothing written about Hanukkah. There's no scriptural work about Hanukkah. Purim was basically almost the last work ever written with prophetic insight. And Haman's name appears there. But in fact, it appears at the beginning of the course of human history, in the very eating of the tree that man and woman eat in disobedience to God's command, and God asks them, did you eat? Haman comes into existence. What does that mean? Stay with me carefully. This is worth effort. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What's the meaning of that tree? The childish assumption is it's the tree of evil. After all, God prohibits it. Man eats from the fruit of the tree, and evil enters his being. That's wrong. That's not correct. The tree is not called the tree of evil. Notice what its name is. It's not called the tree of evil. It's called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, what's the good doing there? If this is the tree of evil, you eat from the fruit of the tree and evil enters the world. Why is it called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? And furthermore, what does knowledge mean? What does da'as mean? Knowledge of good and evil. Well, here's the key. Again, Torah works in its text. Okay, it's not vague ideas. If it doesn't operate in the words, it's not accurate. It's not correct. Okay, Torah lives by its language and its the accuracy of specific, elegant accuracy of every word. What is the meaning of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Tree, by the way, tree in Hebrew means an element of essence. The word eitz in Hebrew is the same root as the word etzem, which means the bone or the skeleton or the actuality. In modern Hebrew, you say be'etzem, it means actually. So tree means a location of an element of essence in the world. And this element of essence in the world is known as knowledge of good and evil. In Hebrew, the word knowledge means intimate bonding between two opposites. That's what the word means. The first time the Torah uses the word knowledge, it's referring to an intimate relationship between man and his wife. And the man knew his wife. That means intimate bonding. Of course, the question is, why is knowledge intellectually, what does that have in common with male-female bonding? And the answer is that when you know something with real knowledge, the knower and the known become one. Right? When you know something deeply, you don't know it like a machine spits out a computer. You know it with for example, how do you know you exist? Your knowledge of your existence is your consciousness of existence. It's not that you know it as a fact. If you have to relate to your own existence as some registered fact and you have to sort of remember it, you need to see a doctor. You're in psychological trouble. You don't know you exist because it's an external reference. You know it, that is your consciousness. And therefore, knowledge, where the knower and the known become one, and therefore, the original meaning of the word in the Torah, long before it's used for intellectual knowledge, is male-female bonding into one. So let's read the verse accurately. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This is the tree where good and evil become so enmeshed that they can no longer be distinguished. This is not the tree of evil. This is the tree of doubt, the tree of confusion. If you look in Kabbalistic writings, the tree is referred to as Ilana Desfeka, the tree of doubt. When man and woman eat from the fruit of the tree, they don't become evil, they become confused. From that moment on, the human condition becomes one in which good always has some bad, good always has a price, and bad always has some potential redeeming feature. No matter how deep you have to dig to find it, there must be something there. The world from that point on becomes an admixture of good and evil, and nothing from that moment on becomes pure. What do we mean by confusion? Well, let's look what happens. Man eats from the fruit of the tree, and next moment he's hiding under the trees, hiding from the one who sees through the trees. Talk about confused. One moment he speaks to God and he knows clearly who God is. The next moment he's hiding behind the trees as if God cannot see him. Talk about confusion. But there's something worse than that. When Adam's hiding under the trees, pretending to himself that God cannot see, God appears in the garden, notes man hiding, and says, is that the game you want to play? There's a rule in Torah called Hashem Tzilcha al Yad Yaminecha. God is your shadow at your right hand. The way you play the game, that's the way he plays the game. You want to play the game as if I cannot see you, says God? Ayaka, where are you? Where are you? Man lives as if God cannot see him, and God responds by saying, where are you? Can you imagine the anguish of man and woman hiding under the trees in a torment of failure, wishing God, schlep us out and bring us back to you? And God walks into the garden and says, where are you? So they schlep themselves out from under the trees and they face God, and God says to them, Hamina ate? Did you eat? I don't know. You tell me. Did you eat? Did you disobey me? I don't know. And God's doubt, the fact that Hashem himself does not know what's doing with man, in response to man's pretending he can get away without God knowing, that opens the gap in the world between the imminence of Hashem in the world that was here previously and the gap that exists now. And that's where Haman is born. Haman, the progenitor, the peak personality of Amalek, that nation which represents the gap in the world, that nation which represents human doubt, comes into being where the human being ingests a fruit of a tree that confuses good and evil, becomes confused, and God is no longer immanent in his life. Man pretends God cannot see him, and God pretends he cannot see man. And that is called Amalek. That's what's going on here. Let's think this through further and see how far this goes. So I'm suggesting to you, our original problem is not evil. Our original problem is confusion. You can perpetrate atrocities and you can live in evil only because you're confused. Let me put it to you this way. If you saw evil for what it was, it would be so offensive, you wouldn't go near it. It would be pure, I would use the word excrement. And let me tell you why. Because before the fruit of that tree was eaten, there was no excretion possible. Man ate food that was angelic food. That's what the Medrash says. The angels prepared his food, and there was no excretion necessary. Excretion is a necessity when you're eating an admixture of good and bad. Then the work must be done to separate the nutritious, which is spiritual and beautiful and delicious, and reveal the other side, which is highly offensive. Before that, before the eating of an admixture, the body absorbed, and the world absorbed, and the mind absorbed purity, and there was no need to excrete. The Rambam puts it like this. Maimonides says that before they ate the fruit of the tree, there was no good and bad. There was only true and false. In human consciousness, there was true or false. Something existed or did not exist. That's all. That was the clarity. After you eat the fruit of the tree, there's a good and a bad. The good is good, but it has a price. The bad is bad, but it may be worthwhile. The fall was from true and false to good and bad. From a clarity, a pure clarity, to an admixture of the two in combination. And therefore, how does the human body function? Look at the lowest level of the body below the diaphragm. Excretion, absorption of nutritious, excretion, which is highly offensive, a very humiliating aspect of the human condition. In the chest, which is higher, there's absorption of oxygen and excretion of the toxic gases. It's not as offensive, but it's a separation. What happens in the third level, the head, is absorption of kedusha and sanctity and truth and what's valid and objective, and learning to excrete and in a disciplined fashion deny and eject that which is false. Rav Dessler puts it like this. He says the function of a Jew in the world is to make havdalah. That's your role in the world, to make havdalah, distinction, to make a distinction between that which is absorbed and pure and that which is not. That becomes the work of the world now. Dare I say, when we apply it to COVID, I think we discussed this previously, we live in a world of utter confusion. Utter confusion. The vaccine is going to make you sterile, and it's going to broadcast your brainwaves to Bill Gates, and it's going to anything but help you. COVID has led to the loss of three things: taste, smell, and common sense. Okay, confusion is rampant. I mean, that's another side. But anyway, be that as it may. So that is what happens. By the way, think about this for a moment. The Jewish people are walking through the desert, and they are not excreting. When the Jewish people walk through the desert at the level of Adam before the sin, in direct contact with God and receiving the Torah, no excretion took place. That's what the Medrash tells us. They were eating manna. Manna is a food that's absorbed in purity. There's no excretion when you eat the manna. The manna was crystallized Shekhinah, says the Ramban. God's presence crystallized. That's what they were eating. In fact, it was so spiritual, the manna.
Rabbi Tatz, you've frozen on us again right after it was so spiritual. You almost have to think that Rabbi Tatz did this on purpose, leaving us on a cliffhanger this way. Okay, so we lost the spotlight. That means
Okay, so we're together?
We're back.
Okay, we might have to put up with this, I'm afraid, but it's just part of the masked and confused world. What can I say? Manna was crystallized shchina, the divine presence crystallized. When you ate the food, it was so high they couldn't name it. You know what the name of the manna is? Man in Hebrew means what is it? It was so elevated they couldn't even name what it was, and they called it simply what is it? When you eat food like that, there's no excretion. And listen to this. The Jewish people walking through the desert, and what is their spiritual nemesis? Which nation do they encounter in the desert that oppose them spiritually? A cult called Peor. You know what Peor was? The worship of excretion. It was idolatrous worship of excretion. What are we talking about? Weirdos? Kinks? What is going on? The Jewish people representing truth, and their spiritual battle is against a nation and a cult that elevates to idolatrous worship excretion. The Medrash says there was a woman who explored every idolatry in the world. You can imagine what she saw and what she was exposed to and what she was required to do in those licentious systems. When she came to Peor and she saw that the worship of this idol was performed by excreting your bodily excretions in front of the idol, she was so disgusted. To show her disgust, she walked over and performed her own excretions on the head of the idol. And the priests of the idol said, "Lady, we've never seen worship like that. That is consummate." What is going on? What's going on is the human story is absorption, excretion. That's the result. That's the result. Havdalah. Which side are you? Are you absorbing the sanctified and ejecting completely, revealing completely what is false and non-objective? Or are you on the opposite side and wallowing in that? In case you think this is extreme and bizarre, look at the culture around you. Are they immersed in sanctity and kedusha and making clear distinction between that which is licentious and immoral and prurient and disgusting and violent? Look, maybe where you guys live in Canada, it's a pure world and people are, or are they wallowing in that stuff and have no ears and eyes for the sacred and the objective? Ask yourself what sort of society we live in, but be that as it may, that's the battle. And therefore, the nature of the battle is the Jewish people are in the world, Atem Eida, you're my witnesses. And Haman represents a nation, Amalek, which is in the world to say maybe not. We represent certainty and they represent maybe. We are the closing of the gap. Hashem is in the world and they keep the gap open. Maybe not. You know, how did Amalek attack us? They lived hundreds of miles away. The Jewish people are going to receive the Torah. This nation sent their army hundreds of miles to attack the Jewish people, because if we're in the world, they non-existent. You know, when they attack us in the desert, the Torah uses the word asher korcha baderech. That word is a very potent word, very, very pregnant word. The word has three meanings. Asher korcha baderech, which means they happened upon us, happenstance, fancy meeting you here. They traveled hundreds of miles to attack us. And when they meet us, the words are, fancy meeting you here. What a coincidence. Because they represent coincidence in the world. The second meaning is cold. They cooled us down. And the third is a certain type of impurity. Now's not the time to go into that. What does it mean, cool us down? Rashi says, here's the story. When the Torah was being given to the Jewish people, the nations of the world realized what was happening. They went to their prophet Bilam, and he said to them, Hashem oz la'amo yutein, God's giving the Torah to the world. And the nation said, let's go for it. God is appearing and giving us, and they streamed towards Sinai en masse. Amalek saw what was happening. If the world accepts Torah, we're dead. We are the gap in the world. Our energy in the world is to keep that out of the world. And therefore it was worth attacking the Jewish people suicidally. And Rashi says they threw themselves at the Jewish people like a man throws himself into a bath of boiling water. He gets badly burnt, but he cools the water. And when they did that, the world stepped back. Oh, they're mortal, these people, you can attack them. And all nations held back, except the Jewish people who pressed on and received the Torah. Amalek attacked us suicidally because their value in the world is to live by our death. And therefore, it's a battle to the death. You have to understand, the Torah is commanding genocide. You have to know what this means, genocide, to wipe out a nation. This is the Torah that commands kindness to animals. That, let's be specific. Do you know there's a prohibition in the Torah to kill an animal and its offspring on the same day, without getting to the problem of killing animals in the first place, which is problematic. But let's say you have a reason to kill an animal. You may not kill a cow and its calf on the same day. Why? The Ramban says, you know why? Because that's a premonition of genocide. progeny. You're talking about parent and child, 2 generations in the same day, like Haman, men, women, and children on the same day. That's already a hint to a genocide. That means a species might go out of existence. That you cannot do. Now, that's the understanding of that prohibition. So the Torah prohibits even a symbolic approach to elimination of a species of animal, and here the God commands us to wipe out a nation. What is going on? And the concept is, this is the nation that lives to kill us. It's on the geopolitical level. They kill us or we kill them. You're not talking about it. You're talking about a nation that is doing nothing other. What can I say? Think Iran, trying to build a bomb that they intend openly, publicly. They're telling you about this. They want to drop it on Israel. And you know what? If it wipes them out too, that's fine. There was a time on earth where suicide attacks were unthinkable. He's not going to kill you. He's going to die himself. Nobody's going to bring a plane down in the air because he kills you. He's going to die. Today, they're considered a privilege. What do you mean they're not prepared? They'd love to do that. On the contrary, that's the Amalek philosophy. And therefore, on the geopolitical level, it's a genocidal war to the death. But on the spiritual level, we are in the world for one thing only, the Jewish people, to survive through history, to testify to the fact that there's something behind the mask, that the mask is not the reality. And they're in the world to keep that gap open. And that's the showdown and the battle to the death. And therefore, it shouldn't take much imagination to understand that Purim, when we battle Haman, is a battle of the mask. It is the mitzvah is to get confused. The mitzvah is to get drunk. What sort of command? What were the sages thinking? As Jews, we look at the non-Jewish world and we regard drunkenness as the lowest form of. We denigrate that. It's beneath contempt. The non-Jewish wallowing in drunkenness. And here we have a mitzvah to get confused. The mitzvah is to go get drunk. I mean, what were they thinking? The concept of Purim is to enter a stage of unknowingness and masked reality and veiled aspect of the truth, and to get confused, and through that assert where the truth is and where the value is. It's for the avoidance of doubt and for the climbing out of confusion. That's what we are in the world for. That's what Purim is. Let's take this a little bit further. We learned last week in the Haftarah, King Saul. King Saul was given the mitzvah to wipe out Amalek. There was a juncture in history at which he was commanded by God, take your army and wipe out Amalek. Listen well to this. On a simplistic, nationalistic level, it means these people are a threat to you, wipe them out. On a spiritual level, Saul, I'm giving the opportunity to bring a messianic reality into the world. If you kill Amalek, you're eliminating the gap in the world between the world and me. I become imminent and present in the world. That's called Mashiach. Saul's role was prepare the way for the Mashiach and then give over voluntarily to King David. Saul could not have been the messianic king. He was from the wrong tribe. He was supposed to be the Mashiach ben Yosef, the precursor to the final messianic personality from the house of David. He should have prepared the world for that and given over to David. And he had the opportunity to do that. Saul took his army and he wiped out Amalek, but he left one man alive. One man, the king, Agag. He left the king Agag alive. Made a tragic mistake. Samuel, who had ordered him to eliminate Amalek, heard about it, came the next day, called for Agag and killed him himself. However, because he'd been alive for one more day, there was a woman pregnant. And that pregnancy resulted in progeny. And who is the distant descendant of that pregnancy? Haman. You see, and by the way, the Medrash says there were 2 people descended, significant people. One was Haman and one was Rabbi Meir, who learned Torah in Bnei Brak, one of the sages of the Talmud who learned Torah in Bnei, through various types of conversion. What is going on? What is going on? Let me explain to you what's going on. Says Rav Tzedakah Cohen, why did Saul make such a tragic error? What was he thinking? And here's what he was thinking. He made the same mistake as Adam. What was Adam's mistake? Please stay with me. It's so important to understand this clearly. Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, found themselves in a world where everything was totally clear. The world was incandescent with spiritual light. And his problem was, what can I contribute? God, you've put me in a world holding my little candle aloft, in a world blazing with light. What is my candle worth? What does it mean? The phrase in the Talmud is holding your candle high at noon. Yeah, ridiculous. You're giving me no work to do. You're giving me a world in which all is clear. God, let me make it a little dark. Let me step back into the darkness so I can shine my candle. Let me set myself at a little distance from you so I can move back to you through my own effort. You can't talk about love between 2 people when they're chained together in closeness. Love is when you swim the oceans and climb the mountains to get back to somebody. God, you brought me so close to you. You've given token work in the world. Let me open a little gap in the world and let me close it for you. And God said to man, don't try that. You know what the price will be? The price will be 6,000 years of bloodshed and mayhem and chaos and torture. And man said, I'm prepared to go through that for you. That was the mistake. What was the downside? The downside was 6,000 years of mayhem that we're living through. What was the upside? We get to contribute something. We get to create something and contribute something. Listen to the language of the Talmud. Let us give thanks to our forefathers, because had they not sinned, we would not have been here. The upside, Adam wasn't a fool. Adam was cosmic in his wisdom. What he wanted to introduce into the world was a gap, so that he had some work to do to close the gap. Let me assert my love for you and give me a role to play. And Saul made the same mistake. Saul said, you know what, God, if I wipe out Amalek, there's no role for us. We simply enter the zone of reward. Let me keep a little bit of them alive, just a small amount of the gap, so that we can have some work to do and eliminate that. And what was the result of that? 2 personalities. Haman, who tries to kill the Jewish people because his role is to keep the gap open, and Rabbi Meir, who learns Torah in Bnei Brak. What does Meir mean? The one who illuminates. What is Torah called? Oraisa, that which illuminates the world. True, yes. When you open the gap of doubt in the world and darkness, then somebody can shine a light. The price you pay is the darkness and the situation of human unknowingness and distance from God and God, why have you abandoned me? The upside is you get to create something. You get to shine a light in the world. You get to learn Torah and create. That is the battle. What happened at Purim? Purim was that node in history at which the lights went out. Until Purim, God appeared in the world, miracles, prophecy, the world is a luminous place. And then the light begins to fade. And Purim is the cusp of the disappearance of the divine light. Think about it for a moment. What happens at Purim? There's a Megillah. The Megillah is all about coincidence. For the first time, there's a miracle in the Torah, but it's a hidden miracle. The king couldn't sleep. Haman happened to arrive that night. The king was married to a girl. She omitted to tell him that she was Jewish. One coincidence after another. There's no dead people being revived. There's no manna falling from heaven. There's no oceans being split. It's all coincidence. And that story of intrigue and coincidence leads from the Jewish people's destruction to a massive, amazing reassertion of Torah in the world, such as never been before. But it's all hidden. The protagonist is called Esther, the hidden one. By the way, her real name was Hadassah. She's called Esther because in Persian, Esther means the moon. Istahar, which is hidden every month. So she's the hidden one. Right? Purim means the luck of the draw. Oh, you don't see a divine hand, it's all luck. Purim is not even a Hebrew word. The Megillah does not mention God's name. Show me one page in the Torah that doesn't mention God's name on every line. The Megillah doesn't mention God's name. It says the king. The king. When it says the king, it means God, but it doesn't say that. The word Megillah in Hebrew, by the way, means to roll up as a scroll, and Megaleh, to reveal. It hides and reveals at the same time. There's a debate in the Talmud about whether Mordechai and Esther were prophets or not. Debatable. Were they prophets or were they simply inspired? Not clear. Confusing. Cusp of moving from prophecy into mere spiritual inspiration. And Purim introduces the phase of the oral law. And here's the key. Until then, we have the written law, God dictating and performing miracles, revealing himself in the world in speech, prophecy, and action miracles. And then Purim comes and God reveals himself now in the Talmud, which is the oral law, in which nothing's clear unless you clarify it yourself. The first phase of history is called vision. Prophets were called seers. The second phase of history, the oral law phrase, is called the phrase of hearing. Unless you, in the Talmud, you know, the Talmud's called the Babylonian Talmud, Bavli. Bavli means Babel, where language becomes deconstructed and broken. You know how the Talmud works? Amazing thing. How does the Talmud work? It takes wrong ideas, and out of the wrong ideas, by deconstructing them, teaches you the proof. Show me one mathematics textbook, please, that goes through 3 pages of proof and then says, I fooled you. Wrong. That's how the Talmud works. And the reason is when you've got a broken vessel, you can only have the broken shards to work with. You have to reconstruct out the broken pieces. And therefore, the first phase of history before Purim is seeing. And after Purim, the work is hearing. You got to hear it. The Hebrew word Shema means to reconstruct. We translate it as hear, but the literal meaning of the word Shema in Hebrew means to put together pieces, to assemble. In the very Haftarah we read last week, it says, Vayeshama Shaul et ha'am. Saul gathered the people together. Hearing is an assembly, because when you hear, there's one word and then another word and then another word, and you assemble the meaning. Only at the end of the sentence can you construct what the meaning is subjectively within yourself. Seeing is not like that. When you see, the scene is all there, all the pieces are there. In Hebrew, the word for seeing, which is re'iyah, is exactly the same word as ra'ayah, which means a proof. And that's why witnesses have to see, not hear. Seeing is believing, they say in English. When you see it, it's clear. But hearing is a personal construction. It's done, and it takes a sensitive balance. When you hear, you have to know what to emphasize, what is the real, what is ancillary, what is primary. It's got to be balanced carefully to get an objective meaning. By the way, the ears are also the organs of balance. Isn't that amazing? The Hebrew word for an ear is ozen. That means balance. Where's the organ of balance? In the ear. Why? Well, it evolved that way. You know, it's another accident. It's only recently discovered in medicine, by the way, those last few centuries, that the ears not only hear, they also balance you. Right? Where the construction has to be put together with a sensitive sense of priorities and balance. But be that as it may, we are now in the era of darkness, where clarity can no longer be seen, in which you have to hear, as the Talmud says, Tashma, come and hear. The Kabbalistic works say, Tas Chazi, come and see, I'll show you. You know what the Zohar is? The central Kabbalistic work. Zohar means a shining light. The Zohar means a shining light. The Talmud is no shining light. The Talmud is all confusion out of which you have to extract clarity. That's what Purim introduces. And therefore, Rabbi Bookbinder, I leave you and your compatriots with the theme, understanding the theme that Purim is a journey into the world of doubt. We dress up, we pray to be what we are not. We celebrate confusion. We enter a situation of drunkenness and doubt. We are going back to the tree of confusion. Ilana Desveka, the tree of doubt. We're going back to the origin of history, where man sins. He doesn't sin by introducing evil. He sins by introducing confusion into the world. If evil, listen carefully to this, if evil were visible as evil, it would be so offensive you wouldn't go near it. The reason people do, in the original world, evil was pure excrement. Nobody would touch it. But because it's dressed up together with the nutritious and the delicious, the combination looks amazing. And that's the problem. And so the mitzvah of Purim is to enter the world of confusion and generate clarity. Until Purim, that's not the work. Until Purim, the work is to be sensitive to the truth and to absorb it and charge up the voltage, the batteries. From Purim on, the work becomes to live in a world of darkness and confusion, no prophecy, no miracles. We haven't seen miracles for centuries. We haven't heard the voice of prophecy for 2,500 years, 2,200 years. The idea of Purim, and when all is said and done at the end of history, one festival will remain, and that's Purim. Not Pesach, not Shavuos. That stuff will become null and void. What remains at the end of history will be the celebration of Purim, a post-prophetic festival in which two individuals generated a clarity. Mordechai giving Torah instruction, and Esther at the coalface making it happen, sacrificing herself, entering the situation of a humiliating relationship with this non-Jewish king and remaining there, right, for the purpose of revealing in the world a whole new vision, a whole new way of hearing, which is the phase of the oral law. And a new era dawns. Let me leave you with this. The Talmud says that at Purim, the phrase is this: Ma shachas soifa laila, just as dawn ends the night, Esther soifa nisim. Listen to this phrase, amazing rabbinic phrase. As dawn ends the night, Esther ends the miracles. As dawn, there's a great book written about this, by the way. Let me show you. This is a highly recommended book. You need to buy yourself at least 2 copies to understand it deeply. This is called, my wife, by the way, did the artwork for the cover. And the original oil is for sale. If you care to spend a small fortune, we might consider selling it to you. But be that as it may, in the back of the book, it has a chart of Jewish history, which shows where Purim fits into the span of history. And you can pull out this chart and put it up on the wall. But anyway, this book documents the transition in history, and it's called As Dawn Ends the Night. And that's taken from the rabbinic phrase in the Talmud. And the phrase is, as dawn, Ma shachas soif kol halayla, just as dawn ends the night, Esther ends the miracles. Meaning, written miracles end with Esther. It's a hidden miracle, but it's written in a book. It's a coincidental type of a story that miraculously leads to our salvation, and it's documented. And after that, no further miracles are documented. Even Hanukkah, which happened a little later, is not documented at all. There's no book of Hanukkah. There's no book in the Bible that tells the story of Hanukkah. And therefore, Esther, just like dawn ends the night, Esther ends the phase of miracles. And the obvious question with that is, the metaphor's reversed. The metaphor's reversed. As dawn ends the night, Esther ends the miracles. One moment. As dawn ends the night is clarity. Dawn ends the night where the light breaks. The dawn breaks. Now you see. And Esther ends the miracles where the world goes dark. What are the sages telling us? Let me say it again. Just as dawn ends the night, Esther ends the miracles. We're talking about a transition from light to dark at Esther, as I've been explaining it for the last 45 minutes. And the phrase in the Talmud is, that's as dawn ends the night. Dawn ends the night is good, not bad. And here's the secret. In that paradoxical metaphor, the sages are teaching you a new light is dawning. That's the point. Previously was flashes of brilliant lightning, unmistakable. But now a dawn breaks in which a new light is, the light that we shine, the illumination that we bring to bear on the world, which is the point of human history. The world was not created for God to reveal what he's capable of doing. No, he doesn't need that. The history was created for humans to reveal what we can reveal in the world. And we reveal what we can reveal in the world when there's a dark world. And identifying somebody who's wearing a mask is a skill. And seeing God in hidden form in the world is a skill. And that's the point of Hanukkah. It's learning to see in the darkness, to see around corners, to strip the mask away, to read clarity into confusing situations, and to appreciate what the world takes to be a darkness, that in fact a new dawn has broken. Okay, let me thank you for this opportunity. If you have any questions with which you wish to confuse me.
So first of all, I think I have to apologize to everyone. I think I should have asked everyone to buckle your seatbelts before Rabbi Tatz spoke, because if you're not paying, very strong attention, the ideas are so deep and come so rapid, they can pass right by you. So thank you so much, Rabbi Tatz. There are a few questions. So I'll start with the Eldon. Eldon's question, actually, his question preceded your comment, actually. So he's mentioning the Gemara Yerushalmi that Rabbi Tatz you mentioned regarding the fact that Purim will be the only Chag that will remain come the time of Mashiach. I think Eldon is asking, why is that a necessity? And if you could please explain or elaborate on that.
So very briefly, the concept is that all the festivals are necessary nodes in time, way stations on the journey to the final destiny of the world. And once the journey has been undertaken, then they fall away. We no longer need to celebrate those nodes that take us to the destination. The stations are irrelevant when you reach the destination. But Purim is the final transition. Purim is the point of the exercise. Purim is the mechanism of stepping from doubt into clarity. Purim is the final dawn that remains forever. And of course, it's the one that's a credit to us. Pesach was God's credit. He took us out of Egypt and began the process. But Purim is the one that we did. And therefore, that remains with us as an intrinsic part of our history. There's a lot more to be said about it. But in this marvelous book that I just recommended, you'll find all the references and all the details. I see another question here is about that certain Hasidic sources speak about duality in the world. But of course, the point is to make a unity out of the duality. That's exactly the point, is to appreciate that body and soul are bonded in a unity. Our vision of the next world is a Tchias HaMesim, where the body is resurrected. It's not a disembodied soul. The point is to make a unity out of a duality. That's exactly the point, indeed. And there's an excellent question here I see on my screen. What about the miracles performed by the Tanoim? Very interesting question. I made a claim in tonight's discussion that miracles ended with Purim. And the Talmud is a post-prophetic and post-miraculous phase. And as your questioner here says, that the Talmud itself is full of miracles. The sages, the Talmud, were able to manipulate nature at will. I cannot do justice to this question. There's a lengthy chapter in this book which deals exactly with that problem. I'll say only a very brief clue, and that is that those are not miracles of divine revelation. Those were the ability of great human beings to manipulate nature. Prior to that, miracles represented God appearing in the world. Human beings were necessary, but God appeared directly in the world. After God stepped back from the world, he gave us the ability to manipulate nature. And therefore, it's the result of great human beings, great enough to bring about changes in the natural order through their Torah. But it's a different mode of miracles entirely. And again, I can't do justice to that fully now, but it's an excellent question. There's a classic source called the Leshem that has a classic analysis of that very question, and it's a marvelous principle. maybe if your question is interested, you can email me and I'll send you the reference in the. One more question. Why do we get drunk on Purim? Well, I tried hard to explain that. Purim is to learn to exit drunkenness with clarity. If you want to put it from a Kabbalistic perspective, and you find this in Hasidic sources, it's to get drunk, listen carefully, and even in that state to know the truth. We're talking, again, a Kabbalistic take on that is to reach a higher consciousness above logic. Above logic. Again, the Jewish consciousness and Jewish bond to God should be so clear that even when the logic is paralyzed, that remains clear. And therefore, that's called adelo yada. That means above the diet. Diet is the faculty of human understanding. We're looking for something that transcends even that is more secure and more bonded and more sure, because logic is always amenable to counterproofs. Human logic is always amenable to proofs and counterproofs and arguments and yes, but there's a depth of awareness, consciousness itself, which is not, right? The fact that you know that it's night now is something you know. You don't know it because of logical. If somebody would give you marvelous arguments that it's actually not night, you would not accept that. There's a certain depth of knowledge which is intrinsic, and we're looking to get to that. And to get to that, we paralyze the lower faculties of logical interaction. Anyway, Rabbi, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm sure your Canadian students and community members are all black belts when it comes to spiritual clarity.
Rabbi Tatz, I want to thank you. There was one last question, if we could ask you that one, maybe. It had to do with the idea of truth being higher than good. You know, is it possible for something to be true and bad, or false and good?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but let me repeat what the Rambam says. He says that, very briefly, he says, a man once asked me this question. He said, a learned man once asked me this question. He said, why was Adam and Eve rewarded for a sin? Meaning, God gave them a command not to eat from fruit of the tree. After the fruit, they gained the faculty of the knowledge of good and evil. Before that, they did not know good and evil. After they ate from fruit, they knew good and evil. So they gained from the sin. That was the question. The Rambam said, you're making a tragic error. Knowing good and evil is not a gift. It's a tremendous demotion, because before, what you knew was true and false. True and false are, that means evil then looked like 2 and 2 equals 5. It would be ridiculous. Who would go near that? Who would have anything to do with that? After you sin, good and evil no longer look, evil does not look like 2 and 2 equals 5. Evil looks like it might be pretty interesting. Evil looks like it might have a price, but it might be very delicious. That's the problem. And therefore, when true and false, which is ultimate absolute clarity, falls to good and evil, which is an admixture situation where it's worth considering both, that is a tremendous demotion. And therefore, knowing good, so to speak, or knowing evil is tremendous, takes tremendous effort to distract and separate those to the, let me put it this way. One needs to separate the good from the evil, and the goal is to come to such a clarity about the good that it looks like 1 and 1 equals 2. And such a clarity about the bad that it looks like 2 and 2 is 5. When you reach that level of clarity, right, with the inner absolute conviction, then you've reversed the process of the demotion of true and false to good and bad. And that's what Purim is meant to teach. That what looks like the luck of the draw is actually something much more meaningful.
Rabbi Tatz, thank you. That's amazing. On behalf of everyone, we had a tremendous showing tonight. And I know it's exceptionally late in where you are. And so we want to thank you for this, and for putting up with us, and for staying awake for us. And everyone, you can unmute yourselves if you want. And, so I want to thank you all. We have a lot more classes coming up. Please be certain to go check out our website, fhjc.ca. You'll see all of our upcoming programs. Rabbi Tatz, thank you for helping us get a better understanding and a deeper understanding of Purim. And now I know what to think as I sit with my bottle of wine in front of me. So thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you very much,
Everyone.
Rabbi.
Rabbi Tatz.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Purim Smith, everybody. Thank you.
Lala Tov. Chag
This
Sameach.
session will be up and available on our website in a day or so. So if
Thank you, Rabbi.
If you want to point out 10 of your friends, you'll be able to catch it again.
Chag
Thank
Sameach.
you. Chag Sameach, everyone. Freilich and Chanukah.
Yes.
Freilich and
Hanukkah.
Chanukah. Sorry, not Chanukah. You think I'm starting my drinking early? Freilich and Purim.
Esther?
All right, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you,
Good night,
Rabbi
everyone. Good night.
Tatz.
Good night.
Night.